Lessons in Excellence is presented by the new 2004 Suzuki Grand Vitara XL7 in association with Island FS Mutual Fund, more than a fund, a friend. Suzlon Energy, powering a greener tomorrow. And Indian Oil Extra Premium High Octane Petrol, extra mileage, extra savings.
Three. Think about it. The Holy Trinity. Three blind mice. The third planet from the sun. The number 3 has a special significance in our lives, and it is with this magical number that we begin our journey. A journey called the Rule of 3. Welcome to another series of Lessons in Excellence. This time the lesson we hope to learn is how best we can leverage the Rule of 3 for business success. The Rule of 3 is a complex and deeply thought out model that has been elucidated rather lucidly in this book. It's written by two very distinguished gentlemen, and these gentlemen have traveled all the way from America to be with us. Allow me to introduce the creators of the Rule of 3. Professor Jagdish N Sheth from Emory University. And Professor Rajendra Sisodia from Bentley College. Liberty of calling you Jagdish, and
please do it. Yes,
and go on with the first. You've sort of your entire theory can be actually captured in one sentence that you've written. You said competitive markets evolve in a predictable manner and are similar across industries and geographies.
Correct.
Take us through that.
It's a discovery process. We discovered this by analyzing 150 different product industries, and we discovered a pattern again and again the same way. So my colleague Raj has coined this as a natural market structure. And we were trying to figure out, is there a pattern about the industry evolution? Surprisingly, while we have theories about firms and companies and competition, we don't have a theory about industry in general. So it seems like every industry starts the same way, ends the same way essentially.
So this natural structure, what is this? There are three large players in an industry?
Right. Ultimately, through the growth and the shakeout of the industry, ultimately you see only three major players surviving. Not 2, not 4, not 5, like clockwork, which is interesting. And most of the mid-sized companies collapse and die, shakeout mergers take place, and niche companies at the same time grow while the big boys are getting together at the same time. Interesting pattern. And therefore the pattern is in two opposite directions every industry goes through.
Raj, you've also written that this is not about industries, this is about markets. What's that distinction?
That's right. Yeah, the markets are really defined in terms of the collective behavior of certain companies, where if you look at Rolls-Royce and Volkswagen, I mean, they're in the auto industry, but are they in the same market? Do they compete with one another in either products or in customers? And they clearly do not. So we have to define the appropriate level at which we look at a particular industry or market.
Okay, so
this is the domain of competition that happens.
So are you then saying that this Rule of 3 applies to markets? So within an industry, within auto for instance, there could be 2 or 3 kinds of markets, and within those 2 or 3 kinds of markets you will find this Rule of 3 applies?
There could be. If an industry is large enough, then it may break down into subcategories at which the Rule of 3 applies. And in other cases what happens is certain markets which were distinct and where we did see a Rule of 3 in each market, for a variety of reasons like technological change or regulatory change, they may come together and the boundaries may break. So we're seeing that over the last decade or so in the information industry, where cable and telecommunications, for example, gradually have been coming together. So the 3 companies that were dominant in each of those spheres, now you start to see another round whereby a new big 3 might emerge.
The Rule of 3.
As markets mature, three large players or full-line generalists rule it. They control 70% of the market. The generalists are surrounded by a constellation of margin-driven or highly profitable players, the product or market specialists. They hold 20% market share. In the middle are a plethora of small players or the ditch dwellers who hold 5 to 10% of the market. These small players must either shrink to become specialists or scale up to become generalists. But in a mature market, the three large players take charge, and then the rule of three comes into play.
Just a while ago you made an interesting statement that it's not 2, it's not 4,
Right.
it's 3.
Right.
And you also at some stage linked it to a balance of power.
Correct.
You believe that the third player is actually the balancing force.
Yes.
But then why not have a fourth player which could be another balancing force?
Interestingly, what happens as soon as you have a fourth player, you have different kinds of a coalition that takes place. You may have a coalition of 2 on each side, which is equal to like only 2. They compete, they rival with each other. We found again and again that like a pyramid is a 3-dimensional structure more sturdy than a square, which is a 4-dimensional structure. There are a bunch of reasons why we believe 3 seems to be the optimal number. People have given us all kinds of theories also, by the way. This is fun project because people are articulating why 3, you know. Always there's a first question they ask. So for example, some of them have said, well, go back to theology. In theology, everything is 3. When people had a duality, like for example, mind and a body, people always invented a third dimension called soul. It's interesting.
So it's sort of human nature to look for the third and stop.
Exactly. It's interesting. It's always, it looks like they look for the third and stop. Yes.
And so in an almost, Raj, in a sort of, I don't know how to say it, it's almost theological in a commercial sense, because you also said that this is somewhere along the lines also related to fundamental consumer psychology.
Yes.
That's the other dimension that comes in, you know. How much choice do consumers really need? You know, there's a myth out there that consumers, the more choice the better, and this is, you know, in a marketplace that you'll be better off if you have infinite choice. The reality is that consumers want a limited amount of real choice. They want to be able to choose between a limited number of distinct alternatives, and if you give them a large number, they simply get confused and very often will not make a decision at all. And it turns out, if you look at consumer behavior research, and Jag is one of the pioneers in that field, where there's something called the evoked set. So when I think of a product category, what are the brands that come to mind? Typically there are 3 that form that evoked set. And the battle really is, and this is for most of the people in the market, the mainstream. So the battle in a marketplace really is, how do I get into that inner circle?
So
and only 3 can fit there.
Right.
So Jack, I mean, here is what to me seems like your theory, that it's coming at it from several, there is a balance of power, that you don't really need a fourth player because 3 can easily balance themselves out. Then there is a force coming in from the consumer side which says consumers really, when they make a choice, look for roughly 3 things. And then they make their choice. So there is a consumer push, there is and there is, you're saying, even an ancient sort of civilizational push towards making it 3.
But interesting on the customer side is more fascinating, not just the consumers, but if you talk to any distributor or a retailer, they don't want to carry stocks from more than 3 suppliers or 3 brand names.
Is that correct?
We
walk into a superstore, you will see a plethora of brands.
Very interesting. Only in those industries where there are shopping goods, where people are still not so sure about which brands they need to buy, or they may be trying to serve all kinds of segments in the marketplace.
Presented by the new 2004 Suzuki Grand Vitara XL7 in association with ILNFS Mutual Fund, more than a fund, a friend. Suzlon Energy, powering a greener tomorrow. And Indian Oil Extra Premium High Octane Petrol, extra mileage, extra savings. Presented by the new 2004 Suzuki Grand Vitara XL7 in association with ILNFS Mutual Fund, more than a fund, a friend. Suzlon Energy, powering a greener tomorrow. And Indian Oil Extra Premium High Octane Petrol, extra mileage, extra savings.
If you thought going global means more profits, think again. In the rule of three, the roadmap to globalize is often not smooth. Many generalists who have seen profits at home have been unable to make it globally. To tread successfully in the global market, generalists should have a strong foothold in at least two of the three regions, America, Europe and the Far East. And there are other factors which spell success globally. The right time of entry, attacking the market as a pack, just like the Korean chaebols who prefer to move into new global markets together.
This is interesting. Let me link this back to the rule of three.
Yes.
Here is a market which is in the beginning regional.
Right.
You are saying within that regional market the rule of three sort of comes into play.
Correct.
Then forces of technology, regulatory changes, opening up of markets, these markets from regional markets perhaps become national.
Correct.
And then perhaps even become global markets.
Correct.
So at every stage the rule of three keeps on kicking in.
Exactly.
And there are newer players who become the three survivors?
Absolutely. For example, the best analysis.
Who survives then?
The best analysis we have done is that if there are three large economies in the world, you have the US,
Right.
you have the Europe together, and you have Japan.
Right.
If there is a rule of three in each of those three markets prevalent already, only one survives from each market on a global basis.
Okay, let me again, so what you are saying is if there are three pharmaceutical companies in the US, three in Europe and three in Japan,
Right.
if the world becomes one large pharmaceutical market,
Correct.
because all of the barriers go away,
Right.
then one American, one European and one Japanese company.
And that's exactly what happened in the passenger tire industry.
Mhm.
We had Goodyear, Firestone and BF Goodrich as three players. We had a couple of niche companies like Uniroyal and General Tire. Europeans had Michelin, they had Pirelli, and they had a Dunlop, which was a British firm. They had actually fourth player Continental, because Europe was still not one integrated market. Japan had Bridgestone primarily. Now they have two more players, Toyo and Yokohama. World became radial tires, standard technology by and large. Each one began to encroach into other markets through shakeout mergers. Ultimately, we only see three survivors. Michelin is a survivor out of Europe, Bridgestone survivor out of Japan, and only Goodyear is the survivor from America, for example. BF Goodrich went out of business. Firestone sold eventually to Bridgestone, for example. Merger acquisitions took place across continents in this case, and rule of three has prevailed.
So
now.
therefore the rule of three, Raj, is a very dynamic rule. It's not, here we have an American market which reaches the rule of three in tires, to pick up Jag's example. Even the Europeans have reached the rule of three. The Japs have also reached the rule of three. Things change and the rule of three comes into play again.
That's right.
And two die.
Yep.
It does two die, or the number of the other companies, I mean, some of them did die, but like BF, some of them got out, they got into specialty chemicals.
Yes.
Some of them became specialists, they only made tires for airplanes, they only made tires for farm,
Yeah, they're no longer the big guys in the business.
Yeah, they're not choosing to, serve the broad middle of the market, so to speak.
This brings us to the chaps who are outside who are not the three.
Right.
In your theory, you said these are the specialists.
They're specialists.
These are the super specialists. And these are people who dominate either one product category or dominate one market.
Correct.
So you're saying in the tire business, for instance, this is what happened. Some of the larger players, say a full line company in the US, when everything became global, it actually became, say, a super specialist.
Right.
Say in the US, focusing on one product. These specialists, is there a rule there as well? Is there a number three in the specialists?
No. Typically what we have found, and again this is through observation, is that you have two levels of specialists. Well, you have three kinds of specialists. You've got product specialists, you've got market specialists, and then you have some that are simultaneously both. In other words, they are the super specialists. They actually focus zero right in on a single product and a single market. And what we find is that if you're talking at the level of a product or market specialist, there you typically tend to find two companies in each of those niches that are rivals with one another. But if you get down to the super niche, product market specialist simultaneously.
Give us examples so we can lock into these categories.
Yeah.
Okay. We have one in our book on the super niche. There's a company in the US, I'm trying to recollect the name, that makes mirrors. The rear view mirror now has become a high-tech device in a car. Okay, it has all kinds of automatic sensors. It has the voice technology built in for your cell phone. It's got a variety of other things that are going on in there. Auto dimming, it can move up and down, etc. There's one company that controls about 90% of that market.
Okay.
This is what they do.
So this they
that
supply
is a
to
super specialist.
all the auto companies in the US and perhaps
Most of
outside.
the major ones.
Most of the major ones it supplies.
That's right.
So that's a super specialist.
Right.
But give us the example of a market specialist where you say roughly two people will sort of come in and stay.
Yeah. Jag, would you say Limited or Gap or those kinds of companies in a shopping environment?
There are two kinds again. In a product specialist, you would have a Foot Locker in a retail store, for example. It's about two only can stay. Athlete's Foot is the other one, exactly right. And
Nike?
Only two. Nike is a manufacturer, not a retailer.
Okay, so you're looking at retail.
At a retailer in this case. Okay. And in terms of market specialist, we see it's more than two, but depends again. Limited is a very famous company. Limited has a bunch of brands. They serve different segments of the market, women's segments of the market. For example, 18 to 30 young women, or as opposed to teenagers, as opposed to professional women, etc. kind of a category. There will be only one additional chain that will be able to compete with them as market specialists at the same time. So,
if we bring this to an Indian environment, would you say the Nirula's food chain is what, a market specialist?
Yes.
Sort of competes with McDonald's, but competes with McDonald's only within the city of Delhi.
Absolutely. In that case, it's a market specialist. One could even have a market specialization by only offering, in fact, a specific type of a food. Let's say you have dosa,
Okay.
So
a dosa diner. Bombay's got a dosa diner.
Exactly.
Okay.
Something like that. That would again be specializing by either a product category or by a market. By people who like to eat that kind of a food only will go there.
So Barista, the coffee chain, that again is a specialist in the food business?
Exactly.
And you're saying there's no rule on how many there will be, but roughly 2 in a product and 2 in a market category?
Roughly, although we believe that there is no number that we can say, just like we can categorically say rule of 3 prevails among the volume driven players, margin driven niche players, we cannot tell how many.
In your empirical evidence, it's completely random, this phenomenon?
It's basically we have not been able to nail down whether it's only one company or 100 companies in a given industry. It varies all over the map by and large.
So it's really, if you're successful and you can keep your success, then you survive. Would that be, because you're saying there's no number orientation.
Right.
No, it's not to the same extent on the rule of 3 on the right side. But
so therefore there's no market.
The smaller the niche, the fewer the companies that are able to survive within that niche.
But that's the general rule.
Yeah.
But you're saying there is no market force which is driving them to a particular steady state. You're saying steady state differs from markets to markets and products to products.
Yes, because the niches are different sized and the amount of variation within a niche may be different from one niche to another.
Presented by the new 2004 Suzuki Grand Vitara XL7 in association with Island FS Mutual Fund, more than a fund, a friend. Suzlon Energy, powering a greener tomorrow. And Indian Oil Extra Premium High Octane Petrol, extra mileage, extra savings. Presented by the new 2004 Suzuki Grand Vitara XL7 in association with Island FS Mutual Fund, more than a fund, a friend. Suzlon Energy, powering a greener tomorrow. And Indian Oil Extra Premium High Octane Petrol, extra mileage, extra savings.
They are at the receiving end. With their market share in single digits, the ditch dwellers find it difficult to survive in the rule of 3. Unlike the generalists or specialists, they neither possess any scale advantage nor a uniqueness advantage. Even the volume-driven generalists can slide into the ditch if they scale up too fast, with the inevitable result of depleted profit margins. Specialists are not spared either if they move into newer and lower profit markets. Thus, the ditch can prove to be a nail in the coffin for all.
There's a third category that you've identified, which are the ditch dwellers, the guys in the middle, the nowhere guys. They're going nowhere. They're neither big companies who've got market share, they're neither super specialists.
Right.
And these are the guys destined to die or get swallowed up?
They have dead. They are dead actually.
They are dead.
In many ways. And they have not declared Chapter 11 protection, but actually they are in financial trouble.
Why are they there?
Yeah. Primarily because they are caught in between two ways of making money. Either you have to be margin driven, which means you have some uniqueness that you are offering where you are able to command higher value in the marketplace, or you have to be volume or a scale driven. They are neither having the scale economies nor any uniqueness in the process, so they have caught themselves in the middle.
But these are typically people who entered late into the market or entered into the market through sort of an unrelated diversification. Why are they not able to get the success buzz within their companies?
2-3 reasons. First of all, several niche companies, as they aspire to grow, especially I find fascinating if a small niche company does an IPO and is publicly driven company, all of a sudden they are high margin, low volume, so the analysts all pressure them to grow. They grow too fast, they diversify too much from their core competency, and they go into the ditch.
So it's the specialists who try and become bigger
And broader, and in the process they collapse.
Okay, so that's one guy who gets into the ditch.
Second one is that as the rule of three is evolving, some of the companies are left behind, and especially there's a rapid change in the industry by regulation, deregulation. For example, airlines.
Yeah, give us examples.
Airlines is a perfect example.
Yeah.
In the US, we had regulated monopolies by airlines, by regional category. From a city by city, you had a monopoly. We had a big bang theory, complete deregulation. We have 70 airlines that crashed into the ditch by and large. They could not make it because they all tried to become national carriers, did not have the scale, and the biggest reason why most of them failed. This includes big companies like Eastern Airlines, TWA, Pan Am. There's a company called Ozark Airlines. These are pretty large regional carriers. US Airways eventually collapsed. Europe is going through the same thing right now with open skies. In the US, 3 survivors were Delta Airlines, number 3. You had the American Airlines, number 2, United, number 1. Now it's, American number 1 through acquisitions. Fascinating. And the reason they survived is that they all put computerized reservation systems, which give them an advantage in a scale economy. Think about cellular industry. We always had a need for mobility, even in India. But till the technology came along, nobody understood that very well. By the way, the early forecast, when I worked on that industry in 83, 84, early forecast by Bell Labs and McKinsey was that there will be only 800,000 subscribers by the year 2000. Think about how bad forecast was, how conservative the forecast was.
Presented by the new 2004 Suzuki Grand Vitara XL7 in association with Island FS Mutual Fund. More than a fund, a friend. Suzlon Energy, powering a greener tomorrow. And Indian Oil Extra Premium High Octane Petrol, extra mileage, extra savings.